The wait is heavy, the wait is long. Sometimes it's hard to sing a song. The sky is blue, and so are you. It's in these times we don't know what to do. We want to move along, but the season we're in just seems to drag on. This journey has already been such a length, but in the waiting, it produces strength. In the waiting, it produces patience. So in these times, we get better at navigating these spaces. We learn to smile in the middle of our trials. The trauma doesn't go away, but the love, joy and happiness we feel doesn't go astray. We learn to gird ourselves with strength, allowing more space for peace to represent. When we build on a foundation that won't crumble, build on a foundation that won't stumble, we learn to release our heavy load, making our weight lighter. Moving through new spaces, seeing more clearly, the future looks brighter. Creating space to be joyful while we wait. There's always a song on our hearts, ready to participate.
We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the diverse lands on which this story is grounded, the many countries across this continent that hold Aunty Brenda's journey. We also acknowledge that we are gathering once again on Wonnarua country, and we pay our deepest, most heartfelt respect to their elders past, present and emerging. The day this episode goes out live marks the final day of NAIDOC week, a week dedicated to celebrating the oldest, most resilient living culture on earth. Today, our conversation shifts from the broken connections of the past to the deeply personal, ongoing work of reclamation in the present. We are celebrating what it means to come home to culture, to mend what was fractured, and to walk forward into the light of truth and forgiveness. As we celebrate culture, we recognise that storytelling is the heartbeat of this land, the sacred thread of knowledge that has remained for over 60,000 years. We honour Aunty Brenda as a vital keeper of that thread, a woman who has woven her pain into a tapestry of hope for the entire country. We extend this deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today, especially those who are walking their own paths back to culture, identity and country. We see your strength and we honour your journey. As NAIDOC week concludes, let this not be the end of our listening, but the beginning of how we walk together every single day that follows. We are profoundly grateful to sit in this space on this sacred land and to share this journey of healing.
When we can start to reconcile with our own hurt and pain first, we can start to reconcile with each other. The forgiveness is really for us.
I think there is a message there for our entire country.
That's how you perceive our story, but it's not our story. We have a choice. I choose love. I choose forgiveness.
Today we are stepping into the present day, a space defined not by what was lost, but by what has been fiercely reclaimed. We are focusing on a life intentionally rebuilt on the foundations of culture, deep connection and community. It is a space where the ancient tradition of storytelling has become a powerful tool for modern change. And it's here, in this space of positive action, that our conversation continues. After walking through the deep divides of her childhood, Brenda Matthews didn't let the silence of history have the final word. Instead, she chose to speak. She immersed herself in her found culture, listened to the wisdom of the elders, and accepted the responsibility of a knowledge holder. She turned her lived experience into a beacon for the rest of Australia. Through her book and her powerful documentary, The Last Daughter, Aunty Brenda has used the Aboriginal tradition of storytelling to educate, to break down barriers, and to model a rare, radical kind of forgiveness. Her work today isn't just about looking back at the stolen generation. It's about actively creating a unified future, showing us all what practical reconciliation looks like when it is led with an open heart. We are so incredibly grateful that she has stayed with us here on Wonnarua land today to continue this yarn in person. Welcome back, Aunty Brenda.
Thank you.
In the documentary and in the past episode, we spoke about you struggling with that confusion about who you are now, and you were caught between those two different worlds. Looking at you now, I can see this beautiful, grounded presence. Have you found yourself? Who is Aunty Brenda?
Yes, I have found myself. And I realised that I had to go on that journey for my own sake. You know, no one else could take that journey, only me. As anybody else who carries a story, only you can take that journey. No one else can take that journey for you. I've held on to them labels that have held me down for so long, the labels that told me that I wasn't good enough, I'm not loved, and I have nothing to give. You know, my deeper story was telling me that I did have something to give. I had knowledge, understanding and ancient wisdom that I could use in a today, present, being able to go back and walk through all the trauma, I suppose, and open them doors and reopen the old wounds, so to speak, to be able to find that healing and to be able to understand who I was as an Indigenous person, but also an Indigenous woman and just a human being, you know. That deeper listening helped me to get there. Along the way, that listening to the trauma and the trauma when it was telling my story and telling me all that stuff, all the negative stuff, I had to take that negative and the positive of my story and find a balance between the two, because along our journeys, you know, and especially mine, and I can only speak for my journey again, but we tend to lean more towards the negative side of our stories, you know, and that's when we can tip over and go over the edge and start carrying our story wrong way. Understanding I even had a story helped me to understand that I had a connection, belonging and identity in both worlds, you know, and it wasn't until I reconnected with and understanding who I was as an Indigenous person and my spirituality connection to the land and everything that surrounds us helped me to understand my story and who I was.
I've heard other Indigenous people share their story about, you know, standing in the court on the day that they were taken from their parents and being, I think they referred to it then as being charged as a neglected child, mm-hmm. or their parents being charged as neglectful parents. Mm-hmm. And what a huge role that has played in their own identity. Mm-hmm. I know you were very young and that might not apply to you. It might apply to some of your brothers and sisters, but those experiences do have such an impact on our identity, especially in those formative years when we're young people, and it shapes who we believe that we are. Where did your healing journey start? Was it in adulthood, or was there a calling as you grew up after you were home with your Black family? Did you start to feel that connection and integration into your identity with them? Were you able to identify the identity disruption there because you had existed in both worlds?
Yeah, I think so, because, again, I didn't know who I was. I had two places to belong to, two families to belong to, but I couldn't find connection, belonging and identity between either one, you know, at that time and at that point in my life. But like I said, going back and looking for answers on both sides helped me to understand that I even had a story, and understanding that the love wasn't boxed in. It's not like just a Western house structure where you have a mum and dad and son and daughter or two kids and then that's it. And it was a wider sense of that. My white family helped me to understand that on that side, but also my Black family. I've always known that on my Black family, side when I went back there, and I found answers on that side. I always knew that there was something there, and that was that love. Like I said, I'd watch my father and the way he shared knowledge and that love, that's what I was connected to, but I didn't know that and I didn't realise that at the time. But like I said, that deeper listening helped me to understand that the idea of something or someone or labelling, the labels put on us as neglectful children or neglected parents, that identity still be passed down from generation to generation, because now somebody's come and told that story and weaponized their words and used them words against us, and that's our story now. But it's not our story. That's how you perceive our story. That's not our story, you know. And like I said earlier, there's good and bad in all cultures, you know. Being able to understand that, hey, we can find healing through going back and reconciling with our own trauma, hurt and pain first before we can reconcile with others, you know. And that identity of not being a stolen child anymore, not holding on to that identity of that stolen child anymore, or that neglected child anymore. Being able to walk in the freedom of that you are loved, that you are forgiven, that you have the grace to forgive others and love others too.
That's beautiful. Speaking of your father there, he was a Christian, a pastor, an unpaid one compared to the white ones.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that this traditional culture and these Christian beliefs work together to make you who you are now?
We grew up in that sense of going to Sunday school and church, and even when we'd go to rallies, Dad and Mum would take us out to all the different communities and we'd all sit together, and, you know, all the families would just get up and sing, and it would be just that family sense of bringing something to that space and sharing song with each other. And that was so beautiful in itself, because you had all these families just practicing song and contributing to the relationship that was, you know, created in these spaces, you know. But being able to also connect back to my culture and the understanding of that identity, belonging, connection to country, helped me to understand that, you know, they align, you know, these beliefs align, and understanding that, you know, the land brought forth everything for us, you know, helps me to still understand that the land still provides for all of us, you know, no matter what culture we are or wherever we live in the world, the land still provides for all of us. She's our mother, you know. We have that the story of the sky story and the land story. Sky story is the father and the land story is the mother. So being able to have that connection and find the connection to story and understand who you are as an Indigenous person, and that our story doesn't stop just because there's another story here. They're intertwined. So we're able to join each other's stories now because we're woven in time and space in these stories.
Great answer. You briefly mentioned forgiveness in the first episode. I want to talk about that a little bit more, because we've done almost a whole episode on forgiveness before with our beautiful friend Rob Hunter, who we talk about this in our episode called Choosing Health After Hurt. The first episode he did, his story was about how he was a principal and he and his 9 children were kidnapped from his classroom. Horrific story. Please feel free to go back and listen to that if you like. But after he told that story of this is this awful thing that happened to me, he is now very similar to you, getting out there, telling his story so he can teach other people to forgive. How do you feel about forgiveness? How did you get here?
We tend to think that the forgiveness is for the other people, and we want to withhold that for ourselves because we don't want to see the other person heal or get the glory, so to speak. But the forgiveness is really for us. We're carrying the unforgiveness inside us. So we're damaging ourselves. We're hurting ourselves. So that's self-harm. When you think about it, it's self-harm. And the other person doesn't care because they're getting on with their day. They're doing whatever they want to do and how they want to do it. But that unforgiveness is starting to turn into bitterness and anger and frustration and everything that wants to disrupt our lives and wants to tell the story of how we're feeling in that space and time, I suppose. But when you forgive, you can walk in that freedom knowing that you're not bound to that person anymore. You're not thinking about that person anymore because you're forgiven them. And that forgiveness and that sense of relief and that forgiveness of that other person is like a release. It's like trying to get blood out of a stone, I think, that saying, you know, trying to get blood from a stone. You've got nothing to give. Your heart is hardened that much that you can't get anything out of it, and they can't get anything from you. Even when they ask for forgiveness, you can't give it because your heart's hardened that hard. And then I think about an orange or a lemon where you cut it in half and you can squeeze it, and next minute the juice is just pouring out and, you know, your cup could get overflowed. But that's the way grace and forgiveness can flow when you open up your heart and it's softened inside like that lemon or that orange, you know. And then we can, you know, pour into others that way because we have enough in our hearts to give others.
That is a very good metaphor.
Through my own trauma journey, I really learnt how important vulnerability is. And I think that ties in to what you've just been talking about, and that analogy of cutting the lemon or the orange open. To me, you break yourself open in that space of vulnerability, and that gives you then the ability to extract as much as possible towards your healing. Mm-hmm. I could just literally see that playing out as you were explaining it. And I think everything that you've explained there is not just a message around healing for yourself or forgiveness for your own stuff. I think there is a message there for our entire country. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone, some of the barriers that we face. But conversations like this, like what we're having here, where we sit and we listen and we acknowledge and we share parts of ourselves, there is such an opportunity through you sharing the way that you do and with your own vulnerability and your own pain for everybody, your mob, our mob, everybody to learn something that can bring us closer together. I wonder, do you feel the weight personally of that?
Yeah, all the time, you know, because I'm married to a white man. And
sexy one.
And yeah, I feel that, you know. But like I said, I've joined your story now in this in that circle. You know, I'm a wife now, so how do I navigate this space? You know, and I live in a house, so you know, it's like we've got a lot to be grateful for. You know, for our Western brothers and sisters, but we still can't forget about our ways of knowing, being and doing, you know, our cultural responsibilities and that. And I think I can honour that by carrying my story right way, carrying the knowledge that our ancestors have passed down through the generations to be able to create a space, a together space for the both of us, but also for our children because they're the next generations, right? We don't only have to use that sense of forgiveness and that in just the stolen generation. We can apply that to everyday life no matter what we're going through, you know, because white fellas got beef with white fellas and black fellas got beef with black fellas. So, you know, it's we have all these struggles, everyday struggles. So, you know, applying forgiveness and grace and that and allowing space for healing and allowing space for us to acknowledge what's going on inside of us before we can start, you know, before we're so good at interrogating each other, it's so hard for us to interrogate ourselves. I think when we can start to reconcile with our own hurt and pain first, we can start to reconcile with each other And being able to do that and understand that in a space where we can listen to each other and can learn from each other and understand that we all have knowledge to share with each other. And when we bring little bits to the table, we can find that space. Like we're in that space now. So, being able to be here and on this podcast is truly amazing. And your hospitality while we were staying here and understanding, you've got a story here of the vineyards and the grapes and the olives and, talking about the grapes and olives, you press them and, when you press them down, you get that more juice and make that wine and, you can apply that sense of country into your story, and even when you make the olives, you get that olive oil and when they're pressed, you can get more out of them. And I think that's the same with us. When we're pressed, we get more out of us. But when we hold onto our stories or hold onto our hurt and our pain and our trauma, our hearts get hardened and we can only give what we can give, which is in little dribs and drabs and bits. But when you find a space where you can open up like them olives and the grapes and the lemons and the oranges, we get more out of us, and I suppose that's when we can give more. So I think, if these trees could talk, they're probably talking to us. We just probably can't hear them because we're too busy listening to our trauma.
Gosh, I love that analogy so much. You've spoken about telling story right way. Last night around the campfire, you spoke to us about your big sis, little sis theory. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I suppose this is a great example of that. You've got the knowledge holder for this podcast and, the way you run it and everything. I wouldn't know how to run a podcast.
We don't really know either.
But, you've got the knowledge for these house structures and, and what happens in them and everything and the sense of that structure. And you've come to me as your big sister in that space, okay? So your older sister in that space. I'm younger sister by coming here and supporting you, but I'm older sister because I have the knowledge of my story. So it's about creating a space, a brother-sister space where we all hold knowledge and we can all contribute, but your older sister or older brother, if you hold that knowledge, and the younger sister and the younger brother are the support system which support the older sister or brother to do their job in that space. So I think if we can adapt to a kinship system like that, I think it would be a better space for all of us to be in.
And we need to realise in which situation we are little sister or little brother and shut up and listen.
I don't want to say yes, but
I'm going to say yes.
No, but you become Rebecca. You become like Connie and Mac, and Eugene and Jessie, and Uncle Pete and Aunty Jen and them. You become our brothers and sisters and you do hold the knowledge in these spaces. And then we become brother and sister because we hold the stories and the knowledge of, walking in deeper spaces here in this country, like the connection to the country that we have and the spirituality that is connects us to everything. Like I said, is not separate from our story. You become family. So when we can get a sense of that kinship family sense instead of, just house structural sense, and we can apply that to everyday life, for a long time we've struggled through the hallways and doorways of these house structures as Indigenous people, and we still do, our kids struggle. So if we don't know how to navigate these spaces, then how are we going to teach our children to navigate them and our grandchildren? So being able to find that space between the two cultures, the two worlds, the dual identity within our nation now. I mean, we do have dual identity and, I think it's a good space when we can acknowledge that.
You make it sound so easy.
It is easy. We just make it hard as humans.
Yeah. You're speaking there about your children, your grandchildren. I want to hear a little bit more about your family. When we talk about the stolen generation or any trauma, we always talk about that generational trauma. What was it like navigating that as a mum?
For me, that was a beautiful space. I love being mum. I love teaching them. I love watching them grow. I love being able to give, whether they were my children or my sisters or my brother's children, you know. Again, that's that sense of kinship. My sisters and brothers' children would be my own children. So that sense of family was bigger in that sense than a Western structure. Yeah, I just love to give. So I saw all of them, you know, like my children. So they were all treated equal. Well, I hope they think so. Sorry, kids, if you felt left out. I didn't mean to. But, yeah, and now watching them grow up and have their own children, I feel so blessed. I feel so blessed because the family has gotten bigger and wider and more diverse, and like even marrying Mark, and, you know, he's got 4 children of his own, and he's a grandfather for the first time on that biological side. But, yeah, he could never understand what, you know, any grandparent would say, oh, pull out your photos all the time of your grandkids and, you know, talk about them. But he has that sense now of, oh, I understand that. I understand that love, that it's a different kind of love. But I loved being a mum, and I loved the mixed family. I was used to the mixed family, you know, so I felt like I fitted in, but I still struggled because the two worlds were colliding again, because it was the next generation. And, well, how do I navigate this space now and keep telling that story the right way for the next generations to be able to share that together space?
So that wide family that you spoke about, all of them would have been affected by this generational trauma. Do you see that? Do you see that in your own children? Like the cellular pass down that we read about?
Yes, and I do, and I see my kids struggling at times, like, you know, like all our kids struggle at times, but I've learnt to navigate these spaces and learn to have the tools. So being able to share that with them, whether they carry it or take it on board at the time, I don't know, but they will find out that they have that to lean back on should they want to go back and listen or want to go back and collect that knowledge and use that knowledge as a tool in that space that they're in now too. So, because, yeah, like I said, the trauma doesn't go away. It just, you get better at navigating the spaces.
You're also a brilliant role model for them in the way that you have healed yourself and in the way that you've carried yourself forward and shared your experience right way. It is a beautiful example of trying to break that cycle of generational trauma. And I have no doubt that there is an appreciation from your children and coming through your grandchildren for making that choice for yourself.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful to see because, you know, you have, again, you're connected to a black and white story, but it's the next generations, you know. I love that I have gone ahead in time and space to be able to collect the knowledge, to be able to bring back to them and share that knowledge with them so it can help them on their journey. You know, I also understand that they got their own ways of dealing with stuff, but being able to contribute where I can, I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. I truly am.
While we can acknowledge that, Brenda, and there is a real truth in that, very often two things are true at the same time. And while we can romanticize everything that we're covering in these conversations, healing and reconciliation, the reality is that that is not the case everywhere for everybody. I wonder, is there a cost to your family with you being a public face of this? Have you found that there's examples where they're getting one lot of messaging from you and then a different lot of messaging from our society?
Yeah. I don't think it's because of who I am. I think it's just of who we are as Indigenous people, and that story of division still happening. I can pass down healing to my children. I can pass down knowledge and share with them, but it's up to them to carry it on their journey now through their story. So, for example, when we had The Voice and I had to go and vote, I didn't want to get out of the car. I lost identity and belonging again and connection because I felt like that little 2-year-old girl, and I felt like I was going back into the Western system and that I was being told to vote in a Western constitution. Should I be acknowledged that I'm even one of the daughters come with us? And I was like, yous go, I don't want to, I'm right. And he couldn't understand. He was like, no, come on, we've got to go. So I plucked up the courage to walk into the hall, and I felt so frowned upon. I felt every eye was on me because I was black, and I just couldn't understand why I had to vote myself into a Western constitution. That was your constitution. I shouldn't have been never put in that spot, or any other black fella. I can't speak for all black fellas, but from my point of view, that's how I felt. And like I said, I couldn't get out of the car. So when I finally did, I just felt like a walk of shame. And I think that's the same thing that happens to our children. And, you know, that when they go into shop, that stigma sticks with them. That identity of being neglected or neglectful still sticks with them. But like I said, that story of healing, and they need to listen to that deeper voice, that deeper listening. Me going to vote and struggling with that wasn't about being an Indigenous person. I think it was about the way I was being looked at when I walked into that space.
It really strikes me your use of the word there of us being recognised in a Western constitution when it should have just been that way all along. And it really highlights to me the two parts of that one experience. And we'll just use this experience as an example, but I think this example carries across the board that for me in that situation, I went in to vote that day thinking that I was making a really amazing change to our country. And while it didn't get up in the way that I wanted it to, there was a virtue signalling attached to that because, again, around that romanticising of we're going to fix this, we're going to make it better. Not once on that day did I think about what it would be like for one of our First Nations people to walk into one of those polling booths. And I think that's a really good example for us, regardless of the outcome of that one thing. I think that really highlights where our experiences differ. We can have an idea in our head of what it might be like for you, or you can have an idea in your head of what it might be like for me, but it doesn't mean that the reality is what we are presuming it to be. That does tie back to your story, Brenda, in relation to that day you had the conversation with your white parents and they said, oh, you know, is your dad still an alcoholic? Which was not a truth. It was something that had been told to them. And I've thought about this a fair bit since watching your story, and we spoke about this a little bit last night, that when I watched that story, I tried to do it with your heart. And there was that one point where I really struggled with, and that was that misrepresentation of your dad and what that must have felt like when your white parents, you know, labelled him and had curated his identity. But it got me thinking in a broader sense, and it's similar to what we've just discussed here around what Western society was creating at that time. And for Mac and Connie, like when they were told, oh, these kids were neglected or Brenda was taken away because her dad was an alcoholic, that would have been very in line with what our society was curating as a narrative at that point. And I think that some of that come in during The Voice we have lived in a world where governments, media have curated narratives that have been presented to people, which many of us have bought into. And that part about your dad was where I could not. I was angry. I was really angry. And I want to acknowledge the injustice in that part because he's no longer here to speak to that himself. There are still many aspects of this narrative that get spilled throughout our society, still now, today. And I think you do such a beautiful job of being able to address some of that from a space with a very pure heart that is open to understanding both sides of this story and all of the things that can be true for everybody. Considering that everything that you've written about and everything that you have produced has come from this place of vulnerability, but also managing that vulnerability with the injustice that occurred, how does that affect you in today's environment, outside of your storytelling, but you just as an Indigenous woman living your life in this country?
Well, for me, Dad was such a loving person, and he shared that knowledge lovingly. And that's the only way I can do it. I can only reflect my mother and father and what they have placed on me. The love, the forgiveness, the grace, learning to understand, not to lean on my own understanding, but to in all that I am, I do, to acknowledge that, that the bigger, deeper story that we're in, and that deeper listening, that to be able to understand that carrying my mother and father's story on and in doing it in the way they did it and the way they continue to do it, and in the strength of that, and knowing that I have a responsibility to the next generations, whether they're black or white, because again, stories being passed down, and we can still share that story of trauma in our lives, or we can share that healing story. And I choose to share that healing story. I choose love. I choose forgiveness. We have a choice whether to forgive or not to forgive, whether to love or not to love. And I choose to forgive. I choose to love because I want my children to choose love. I want them to choose forgiveness. I want my grandchildren to do that. And if I can share that in a wider sense and a bigger sense and a national sense, a global sense, I don't know, hopefully it might be a ripple effect across any space. That's how I know I stay true to his story. And his spirit comes with me everywhere I go, just as Rebecca's does. And now my white father, Mac. Just being able to carry their spirit in my heart and share that story out of the love and the grace and the forgiveness, just the way they told their story in love. That's all I can do, just reflect my mother and father.
We talk about the information we were fed. We went to school in the 80s, and we've often reflected on the education that we had. It was all about how Captain James Cook was the first person to Australia.
The very first episode of this podcast, I talked about the shame that I carried, that I was a mum to 3 children in her 30s before I actually questioned the history of our country. The honest history, not the one that I filled in on our worksheets with pictures of big ships.
The first people to explore this land. I think looking now at what my children are learning, we've come a long way, and I truly believe that most of the teachers across Australia are doing the best job that they know how to do. What needs to change in our education system? What do kids need to understand about our history so that we can walk together into the future?
From my understanding now at school, because it's been a long time since I've been at school, we have these RAP plans in place now. And, you can put all the RAP plans in place, but if your heart isn't in it, those plans are going to fail you every time. It's got to be about the heart condition. It can't be just about a change of plans anymore. It has to be a heart posture. You have to want to have a relationship with your brother and your sister. And you can't do that if you're carrying anger, bitterness, resentment, or everything that tries to stop you from having a true relationship. And, you can have that. You can put that to any sense or story of your life, whether you're husband or wife or mum and dad, or, if you don't have a true sense of relationship and protect your heart. You've got to protect your heart from anger, bitterness and resentment and that, because if you don't, then you're passing that on to the next generations. And like I said earlier, if we don't have the tools as adults to navigate these spaces, how are we going to teach our young ones?
100%.
And when we're adults, we don't understand or realise we're bringing our trauma and we're teaching these children at schools, and yet we could be having a fight at home and we could be bringing that into the schoolyard and taking it out on the child, or talking the way you would talk to that person at home. And it's just that little child is receiving those words, and it's like, again, weaponizing those words, and that them little ears are hearing that. Our little kids are precious. They need to be taught the right way to go. So when they grow up, they might stray a bit, but they'll come back to that right way and the right way of carrying and sharing their story. If our hearts aren't in the right space, then things are going to fail us again. But also, that Western story is here now, and it's not like we can take everything down or send everybody home on the boat. They're here to stay now. We've got to find that together space. We can't pretend that story isn't here now. It's here. Like I said, we can't pull one down to put the other one above the other one. We have to find that together space and walk together, learn together, listen together, talk together and learn together. And the only way we can do that is when we start listening. We talked about the voice earlier, and I think we've always had a voice, just no one to listen to. So maybe they should have called it ears. No, but when we start to listen, I think we can start to, because like I said, there's so much information out there. It's like an information war, chocolate's good for you one day and the next day it's not. So who do we listen to? Mm. So when we listen to that, deeper listening, we can understand that, we all have a connection and belonging to country, and when I think about it and the damage that has been done, how we're all trying to fix it, but sometimes it's not working, sometimes it's a step forward and two steps back. And I think of that, the land, and when the fire goes through and it's all black and soot and burnt and everything, but then there's these shoots of little green shoots coming up. And to me, that's spiritual healing, and if the land can heal itself, so can we. Why can't we? But we can't do that unless we have truth-telling. And I think the truth-telling starts within ourselves, what we are carrying. Like I said, we're always looking at others, what other people are carrying. I think when we start to see clearly through our own eyes at what's happening within us and what we're carrying inside, then we can start to reconcile with our own trauma and hurt and pain that we're carrying. That individual healing for a collective healing, that, we can start to have that ripple effect of one person healing, another person healing, and sharing story. And we can't do that unless we open up and we start listening. Healing begins within, Healing is hidden in the past. How can we move forward if we don't understand where we've been? You have to go back to be able to go forward, Even hear that in a court of law. Where were you on such and such date? What happened on this date? They go back to that date. So us going back to, understanding that happened, we can use these things as a reference point now to be able to move forward. Because in our culture, we had reference points to understand where we're headed when we go on a journey, and when we come back, oh, we need to go that way because that hill's there, or that mountain's there, or that waterway's there. So being able to use these events in our history as reference points to moving forward, we can start to find healing and start to have that reconciliation. But we need each other. We can't do it without each other. We need each other to move forward and to understand that complexity of the past, to understand the complexity of the present, but to understand where we go from here.
Very good.
You are such a great example of that, Brenda. Watching your story or reading your story and seeing that exact thing play out, where you go back in your own story and move forward through it and heal those parts, not just of your own, but your mum and dad, your white mum and dad, losing your sister, the extended family on both sides. You are the example of everything that you have shared with us today. And I think I can speak on behalf of both of us when our goal is sharing wisdom of lived experience. I think your message is not just for a select few of us. I think it is for all of us. And I am so grateful that you not only agreed to talk to us, but you travelled to do this here right way.
Mm-hmm.
It's been an incredible privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're my sisters now.
We are little sisters.
Pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
And I'm still your sexy husband.
As we come to the end of this 2-part conversation, we want to pause and take a deep breath. Because we haven't just listened to a history lesson. We have been trusted with a life. We've listened to what happens when a person refuses to be defined only by their trauma. We've witnessed the immense strength it takes to choose forgiveness, to reclaim culture, and to turn a painful past into a gift of healing for an entire nation. Aunty Brenda's story reminds us that while we cannot change the chapters that have already been written, we are all responsible for the story we write next. We are all responsible for moving forward, for walking together. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If These Trees Could Talk and What Would They Say are productions of Bellevue Studio. Our host is Shannon Walters, executive and audio production by Megan Anderson, with socials and marketing managed by Mia Oberdorf. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts, so if you would like to support the show, you can rate, review and subscribe. To stay up to date between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. For more information on this episode or to connect with our guests, you'll find everything you need to know in the show notes at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. We're grateful to have you with us and we look forward to sharing what comes next. Thanks for being here.